Kicking off at number 5, the Kaliuche. And for this first foray into these particular ghost ships that haunt the sea, we're going to be heading over to the mythologies of Chile and the many legends that have been built around its coastal landscape. One of those, according to Chilean legend, is that of the Kaliuche, a large ghost ship that sails the seas of Chiloé, a small island just off the coast, where it only ever appears at night. The ship itself is said to appear as beautiful, cast in a bright white light, an enormous vessel with 3 masts and 5 sails each. It is said that when the Kaliuche appears, it is always at night and always full of lights, with the sounds of a great party and a feast on board. Quickly though, it disappears, plunging back beneath the murky depths. Interestingly enough though, although this vessel is said to be similar to the Flying Dutchman, there is a boatload of mythology relating to this particular legend. One of these versions claims that the vessel is crewed by the drowned, souls lost at sea, who are brought to the ship by 3 mythological figures in Chilean legend. 2 sisters, one of them the Sirena Charlotta, a type of mermaid, and the other the Pincoya, a type of water spirit said to protect the Chilean coast. And then their brother, the Pincoy, their male counterpart, who has the body of a sea lion. It's pretty cool. Once aboard, the perished souls can resume their existence in an eternal reverie of adventure on the high seas. However, there is a much more sinister version of this legend, which states that the crew of the Kaliuche instead sailed the Chilo archipelago, luring fishermen and sailors toward it with an enchanting music to enslave them as part of their crew for eternity, where they are twisted and then contorted and put to work in their afterlife. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I prefer the first one, actually. Swinging in at number 4, the Eliza Battle. And for this one, we're pinching the parameters of the 7 seas, and instead we're taking a look at one of the most notorious maritime disasters that, instead of on an ocean, occurred on a river. The Tombigbee River, to be precise, a stretch of water that runs between Columbus, Mississippi and Mobile, Alabama. And here we have the legend of the phantom steamboat of the Tombigbee. Back in 1852, one of the largest river steamboats constructed at the time, the Eliza Battle, was put into service between the 2 southern states. During one particularly cold February in the winter of 1858, after the Eliza Battle had departed the city of Columbus, the ship made its way downriver, stopping on the way at Pickensville, Gainesville, Demopolis and several other small river landings. By the time that the steamboat had left off at Demopolis though, it was filled to the rafters with passengers, and not only passengers but also over 1,200 bales of cotton to be ferried to the final stop. Now, although it roughly still remains a complete mystery, around 2 AM on March the 1st, 1858, about 30 miles downriver from Demopolis, the crew of the Eliza Battle awoke, startled to discover that the cotton bales on the main deck were on fire. Flames soared and quickly engulfed the ship's hull, soon spreading out of control despite the frigid temperatures attributed to the odd, gusty evening. The boat continued onward though, the entirety of the exterior completely engulfed in flames and cut off from their lifeboats. The passengers, many of them who had awoken dressed in their night clothes, were forced to plunge into the icy river below. Now, some of them survived, mainly by floating atop the remaining cotton bales, but all in all, over 33 people lost their lives, both crew and passengers included. The Eliza Battle quickly sank beneath the water, the wreckage of which still lingers at the bottom of the Tombigbee River. It's said that on a particularly cold and windy night, the Eliza Battle will emerge from the icy fog engulfed in flames, once again a warning sign of an oncoming ill omen. Coming in at number 3, the SS Valencia. Now, this one's a little bit more interesting to say the least, because it's a verified fact that the wreckage of the SS Valencia can still be seen to this day, scattered along the beach and rocky shoreline of Vancouver Island's West Coast Trail. After the ship struck a reef during a storm in 1906, the wreckage of the SS Valencia was considered to be the worst maritime disaster along the western North American coast, otherwise known as the Graveyard of the Pacific. The Valencia was a small ship, a passenger steamer that had a long history of carrying both passengers, cargo and troops, but at the time of her ruin she was operating as a tour boat, often running routes from San Francisco and up to Seattle. During the wreckage, tragically 136 souls were lost, with rescue efforts unable to access the Valencia in the ravaging storm. But our ghostly tale lies with those that tried to escape. You see, as the legend goes, in panic the crew launched all of the Valencia's lifeboats, going against the captain's orders, all of which went horribly wrong. 3 flipped on descent, dozens more capsized after reaching the water, and the last one disappeared out into the waves. Since the disaster of the SS Valencia, countless sailors and fishermen have reported sightings of these lifeboats listlessly floating upon the water during particularly calm days at sea. As some of the tales go, these lifeboats are still filled with the skeletal remains of the lost souls of the SS Valencia. Next up, at number 2, the Copenhagen. And it's quite the title really, because the Copenhagen is considered by most to be one of the greatest maritime mysteries of the modern era, with only whispers, rumours and speculation as to its ultimate fate. Built for the Danish East Asiatic Trading Company in 1921, it was the world's largest sailing ship at the time, and primarily served as a sail training vessel for young cadets. In the eyes of many, it was the most impressive sailing ship ever built. However, as the story goes, on September 21st, 1928, the Copenhagen departed from northern Jutland for Buenos Aires on its 10th and ultimately final voyage. A total of 75 people were aboard, and the journey was planned to span all the way to Melbourne, Australia, and then back to Europe. But tragically, as we know, it was never seen again. The thing was though, the captain of the ship, Hans Andersen, was renowned for going long periods at sea without sending any messages, and so it wasn't until nearly 6 months later that the Danish company sent a search party. No wreckage or remains have ever been found. However, following the next several years of the Copenhagen's disappearance, there were a number of highly reputable sightings of a 5-masted ship that fit perfectly its description. In July of 1930, the crew of an Argentine freighter cited what they referred to as a phantom ship during a gale. Their captain noted in his records that this may be the Wrath of the Copenhagen. Dozens of stories and tales have perpetuated around the ultimate fate of the Copenhagen, but the truth is, we may never know. In all likelihood though, it's still out there, somewhere, floating on the endless tide. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, the Seabird. And this story is the literal definition of a ghost ship, and one of the most saltiest sea yarns that I've heard spun in a while. Although this one has a few more twists and turns that you may not have first seen coming. As the legend goes, in the year 1750, a vessel named the Seabird was idling off the coast of Newport Harbour in Rhode Island, and had quickly attracted quite a crowd on the shore due to its elaborate craftsmanship. Soon enough though, the crowd of onlookers noticed that there was something strange about the Seabird. There was no one manning the ship, not a soul in sight. As the legend goes, several moments later, the ship, as if by a supernatural wind, perfectly sailed itself through the rough breakers of the beach, gently landing on the nearby Easton's beach. There, a few brave souls boarded the vessel, only to find the Seabird completely deserted, save for a boiling kettle on the stove, and strangely enough, breakfast already prepared at the table. Now, some accounts state that a group of fishermen had passed the Seabird a few hours before and had even spoken to the captain themselves. Where had the crew gone? What had happened in the few hours that had passed since their last sighting? The truth of it is that no one may ever know, and such is the nature of ghostly tales from the sea. But, well, this is where things get a little stranger still, and take this final caveat with a pinch of sea salt. But as the legend goes, decades later, an old sailor reported to a New England journalist his deepest, darkest secret. In a fit of rage, he had murdered his entire crew just before making port, throwing their bodies into the ocean. And the name of that ship? Well,
coming in at number 5, we have the Narwhal Tusk. If any of you have ever seen the movie Elf, then you're familiar with the cute narwhal in the beginning of the movie, and that movie really brought narwhals to the public's attention and making this sea creature more popular than ever before. But so much about this creature is a mystery. In 1577, the English explorer Martin Frobisher led an expedition of 150 men to the northern Canada in search of gold, but they had come across something they had never intended, and that was the sea unicorn. The myth of the unicorn goes back centuries, and the business of unicorn horn trade was sustained through the Middle Ages and Renaissance by Vikings who killed the so-called sea unicorns, cut off their horns and sold them for an astronomical price. As European naturalists became more familiar with the world's animal, the myth of the unicorn faded, but mystery of the sea unicorn continued. Frobisher's discovery was actually what we know today as the narwhal, but the horn itself continues to be speculated by many. But the horn is apparently not a horn at all, but is a tooth. The relatives of narwhals include species like the beluga whales, orcas and dolphins, but the mystery remains of how did this massive freakish tooth evolve in this one specific species, after its ancestors branched off from whales with ordinary teeth. Many scientists and researchers debate about what this tooth is used for, and some suggest it's an acoustic probe, a rudder, an ice picker, or a spear for battling predators. These creatures don't make it easy for researchers to see them use their tusk for anything at all, so it makes many people continue to question it. Many have come up with of many different theories about this so-called horn and what they use it for and why they have it. It has created a huge debate between researchers and scientists to this day, but no definite answer has come out to this day. In at number 4 we have the Submarine Disappearances in 1968. This is one giant mysterious situation, which is the disappearance of 4 submarines from 4 different countries in 1968. The USS Scorpion, a Soviet submarine K-129, a French submarine Minerve, and the INS Dakar went inexplicably missing over just a 5-month period, and the last 2 disappearing only 4 days apart. The exact causes of these sinkings remain unknown and remain a mystery over 50 years later. The INS Dakar was scheduled to arrive in Israel on January 29, 1968. When it didn't return, searchers went out to find it, but after a while there was no sign of the missing submarine. So the search ended on February 4th, and the 69-man crew was officially declared dead in 1981. The cause of the sinking was never determined, and theories say that either a mechanical or human error caused a catastrophic accident, or that the submarine snorkel was damaged after hitting another ship, causing it to flood. The Minerve was on the training operation in the Mediterranean on January 27, 1968, and when they were on their way home, the men were caught in a bad storm. When it was 30 miles away from the port, the Minerve made contact with the men on land and said it would port in about an hour, but an hour came and went, and the submarine had never returned. A frantic search was conducted with 20 vessels and aircrafts trying to locate the Minerve, but it was eventually called off on February 2nd when they found nothing. The K-129 with a crew of 98 descended on March 8, 1968, and almost 2 weeks into patrol on the North Pacific, the K-129 failed to send a scheduled radio message. The Soviets soon began a frantic search, and after 2 months of no sign of the submarine, they gave up their search. The cause of the ship sinking remains unknown and will likely never be known. Almost 3 months after the K-129, the USS Scorpion, a nuclear-powered attack submarine with a crew of 99 men, went missing in the Atlantic while on its way back from a patrol in the Mediterranean. It was sent out on February 15, 1968, and toward the end of its patrol, it radioed that it was expected to return on May 27th. But as you can guess, the USS Scorpion would never return. Like the others, many searched for the lost ship, but on June 5th, the Scorpion and its crew were declared presumed lost. Over the years, there have been multiple searches for these submarines, but only parts have been recovered, and it's considered one of the biggest mysteries that happened in the sea. No one knows why so many went missing in such a short amount of time, how exactly they went missing for so long, and what exactly made these vessels disappear. And this is a mystery we may never get the answer to.
Next up at number 3, the Mary Celeste, which in fact may very well be the world's most infamous ghost ship, as well as one of the longest enduring mysteries of the 7 seas. Built in Spencer's Island, Nova Scotia in 1861 and launched under the new name of the Mary Celeste in 1868, this merchant brigantine sailed uneventfully across the Atlantic for years as a seaworthy, efficient vessel. It wasn't until her fateful voyage in 1872 where the true ghostly legend began, which has since gathered theories that vary from submarine earthquakes, water spouts, an attack by a giant squid, and even paranormal intervention. No one will truly know the ultimate fate of the Mary Celeste, with every single soul on board never being seen or heard from again, which is a terrifying thought in itself, isn't it? The Mary Celeste was discovered adrift and deserted just off the coast of the Azores Islands on December 5, 1872. It was a Canadian vessel, the De Gratia, which found her in a disheveled but seaworthy condition under partial sail and with one lifeboat missing. The last entry in the ship's log was dated 10 days earlier, which detailed the vessel's last known location, before these mysterious, infamous events unfolded. On board was the ship's captain, Benjamin S. Briggs, his wife Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and 8 seasoned crew members, all veterans of the sea. It poses the question, what dire threat did the Mary Celeste face that caused a highly experienced captain to abandon his ship? Nothing was stolen, all of the crew's possessions and cargo were exactly as they'd left them, but in all likelihood, we may never know. Swinging in at number 2, the Flying Dutchman. Of course, this legendary vessel couldn't not make this list. The ghost ship that can tragically never make port, doomed to navigate the perilous ocean for eternity. In actual fact though, the Flying Dutchman has had such an impact on nautical culture that it's easy to overlook the treacherous tale of its origin. It is thought that the legend of the Flying Dutchman first originated from the 17th century golden age of the Dutch East India Trade Company, a mega corporation that had a stranglehold monopoly on the Dutch spice trade that ran throughout the 16 and 1700s, where tale was told of a Dutch man of war that was lost just off the Cape of Good Hope. Purportedly, every soul on board perished after being ravaged by a violent tempest. The following few days, numerous other trading ships reported seeing a ghostly, ethereal vessel out in the foggy mist of the ocean, flying the exact same colours as the Dutch vessel. Since then, the Flying Dutchman has gathered notoriety as the worst omen you could ever hope for of a phantom ship that heralds the demise of an entire crew, with sightings continuing all the way into the 19th and 20th centuries. In fact, perhaps the most recognised sighting was by King George V himself during a 3-year voyage in 1881 just off the coast of Australia. He noted in his personal log that 13 people had seen the same glowing Flying Dutchman in the early hours of the morning, and later in the day, the ordinary crewman who had spotted the vessel fell from the foremast and, in his words, was smashed to atoms. It's a little bit worrying, that one, eh? And finally, our number one spot, the Orang Madan. And where do we even begin with the bizarre, perplexing legend of the Orang Madan, perhaps the most terrifyingly unexplainable instances of a ghostly shipwreck in history? But, well, the leading physical theory of the Orang Madan may be even more horrifying than it first appears. As the legend goes, sometime in June 1947, an American vessel by the name of the Silver Star picked up several distress calls from a nearby Dutch merchant ship, the Orang Madan. A radio operator aboard the troubled vessel sent a message in Morse code. In rushed, confused dots and dashes, it read, "We float. All officers, including the captain, dead in chart room and on the bridge. Probably whole of crew dead." And then a few moments later, after even more confused dots and frantic dashes, 2 words came through very clearly. "I die." Then silence. Nothing more was heard of them. But well, when the Silver Star eventually located and boarded the apparently undamaged and otherwise seaworthy Orang Madan, what they found absolutely horrified them. Every single person aboard was found dead, sprawled on their backs, frozen in fear, with their mouths gaping open and their eyes staring straight ahead. There were no survivors, but even more terrifying, apparently no signs of injury or foul play. Just as the Silver Star crew was preparing to tow the ship to a nearby port, a fire broke out in the Orang Madan, which shortly exploded before finally sinking into the depths. Since this horrifying incident, theories have ranged from the vessel carrying a highly dangerous chemical nerve agent to an entanglement with the CIA after the result of a secret experiment to an unprovoked alien assault. But if you haven't already sensed a theme with this particular list, it seems that we may never know.
Starting us off at number 5, we have Yellow Jack. We're gonna set sail on a weird one to start us off. If you're a flag enthusiast, you might see the ending of this one coming from a mile away, but we'll get there in a minute. So the legend of Yellow Jack starts upon a spice and gold filled ship preparing to leave the Indies and head back home. The crew was accounted for, the cargo was secure, the captain was feeling nice. Then, at the last second, a mysterious figure asked if they had room for one more. Feeling pretty good about their haul, they welcomed this extra pair of helping hands on board. Wrong move. Turns out this was a disreputable lad known as Yellow Jack, with a reputation so abhorrent that the ship was forbidden to enter any port she called upon. For ages, the crew sailed from port to port, hoping that someone would let them dock, but it never happened. They were forced to endlessly cruise the seas, running lower and lower on supplies. Patience, too. Eventually, the crew went mad and committed mutiny before they all murdered each other. Some say the ship is still sailing, the ghosts of these sea-locked sailors manning the helm. Someday they may find a port that will take them and they will finally be able to rest. In the meantime, they will sail the seas, infecting other ships with the same madness that Yellow Jack caused. Now this is a spooky, ghostly story in its own right, but it could also be a reference to a different ship killer at the time. Disease. The Yellow Jack is a flag flown by ships infected with plague, cholera, and other nasty, fast-spreading diseases. So Yellow Jack itself could be a metaphor for disease, and ports weren't letting them in because of quarantine procedures. Absolutely fascinating, and it would also make a killer movie. A pirate quarantine body horror. Think The Thing meets Wreck meets Pirates of the Caribbean. Oh damn. Coming in at number 4, we have the Kaliuchi, a Chilean ship sailing around an island known for its terrible storms. Shining white sides, 3 masts with 5 sails, blood red. The ship sails independent of any human input. Sure, there's a ghost crew, but the Kaliuchi is known for being sentient. The ship has a mind of its own. It'll glide along the water at incredible speeds and is able to submerge and continue navigating underwater, similar to the famous Flying Dutchman. When it passes, folks say you can hear the crew cackling for a brief moment. It's a ship known for the merriment of its ghostly crew. They throw parties often and hop around on one leg. The folks on board often only have one leg because the other is folded behind their back, similar to another Chilean mythological entity. To top off their strange looks and mannerisms, some crew members have backwards faces, terrifying all who lay eyes upon them. Some say the Kaliuchi is manned by sailors, both dead and alive, dragged from the depths and snagged off passing ships. Another legend says that the ship is piloted by the souls of the drowned, brought aboard by water spirits and granted the gift of life in exchange for their servitude. Not so sure that's a good deal, you know, life eternal, but you'll always be on a stinky ship? Maybe the parties are just that sick. Merchants who trade with Kaliuchi supposedly become very wealthy afterwards, and anyone who has laid eyes upon it wears a crooked smile forever. Again, interesting deal. Lots of money, crooked smile. I guess you could afford a dentist and some plastic surgery at that point.
Next at number 3 is our most recent mysterious beach object, the massive copper cylinder. Last week, a giant cylinder made up of a copper-like material found itself washed up on the shores of Western Australia. The unidentified object's sudden appearance absolutely baffled police officers and locals alike, and the decision to treat the object as hazardous was made swiftly. The strange cylinder can be seen covered in barnacles and algae, suggesting it spent a decent amount of time in the ocean. On top of the aquatic overgrowth, the object is greatly damaged, leading to theories that it was part of a larger whole entirely. My bet is on it being part of a sunken ship, but aviation experts say that it could be a fuel tank from a rocket that had fallen into the ocean at some point in the last year. The Australian Space Agency made a statement, saying they have already begun investigating the object to see if it could be part of a foreign space launch vehicle. However, results remain inconclusive. So what could this thing really be? Well, some theorists claim that this is a part from Malaysia Flight's airline MH370, a plane that went missing around the coast of Western Australia about a decade ago. The missing aircraft disappeared on a flight towards Beijing Capital International Airport with 227 passengers and 12 crew on board. The plane was assumed to have crashed, but with all of its parts still missing, the true fate of the 239 people on that flight remains a mystery. In fact, the search for this plane was actually the most expensive search in the history of aviation, and they still couldn't find it. With this unidentified object appearing on Australian shores 9 years and 4 months later after the disappearance, we could possibly find the long-awaited answer to what happened to flight MH370. If that's the case, we could finally give closure to the myriad of families and friends affected by the disappearance of their loved ones all those years ago. As of now, police and the Australian Space Agency are still investigating the object. So, soon, we might have the answer to one of Earth's greatest modern mysteries ever. Speaking of greatest mysteries, let's take number 2 to Florida, where an 80-foot object was uncovered in Daytona Beach after it was hit by Hurricane Nicole in November last year. The unidentified object is made of wood and metal, which immediately speaks to me that it's from an old shipwreck. And other theories suggest that the Olympic swimming pool-sized object could be from an old pier, or perhaps an old barrier from when NASCAR races would be at the beaches. But it could be something else entirely. Beach safety spokeswoman Tamara Malfers said that the reason the object was uncovered at all was because of extreme, almost never seen before, erosion caused by Hurricane Nicole, one of the most fierce hurricanes to hit the US in 10 years. This observation suggests that the object may have washed up on Daytona Beach upwards of 25 years ago, if it even washed up in the first place. This certainly deepens the mystery, as it seems no one could pinpoint the object's origins or even make an accurate guess as to what it is. Even experts would go to say that every now and then, something pops up, and usually you can tell what it is, but this one just can't confirm. However, that was until Florida's archaeological team were able to date the wood back to the 1800s, strengthening the theory of the object being part of a shipwreck of some sort. However, with nothing certain, this long piece of wood remains an unsolvable mystery, which can actually still be found at Daytona Beach months later, as the cost of its removal could cost millions of dollars. Not like it's going anywhere anyway. right? Well, maybe we should move it, because I'd barely want to touch this next mysterious thing with an 80-foot pole. Taking our number 1 spot is the mysterious Japanese orb. Last February, a large metal sphere washed up on shore in Hamamatsu City in Japan, and caused quite the concern for locals and officials alike. The big yellow ball was initially treated as a threat of some sort, leading authorities to check if the orb was some sort of weird, rusty, boom device. The squad closed off a 200-meter radius around the moon-like object, and used X-rays to determine whether or not the sphere was dangerous. Fortunately, it was assessed as a non-threat, but that only led to more questions. People made all sorts of guesses as to what it could be, ranging from Dragon Ball to discarded spy balloon. One theory even went so far to say that the object is an egg of some sort, for some sort of deep-sea monster? Perhaps Godzilla? Or I guess robot Godzilla if the egg is metallic? And is it just me, or does this thing look kind of like the moon? Well, as if the moon was yellow and rusty and metal and not whatever, the moon is made out of, it doesn't matter. The most supported theory for this orb's origins are that it's a mooring buoy, a floating device that is used to secure vessels while in the water. However, these buoys are usually fixed in whatever position they're originally placed in. So that begs the question of how in the heck this thing was able to make its way to that random Japanese beach in the first place. Plus, a researcher in Japan commented that most buoys are around the size of a basketball. This sphere was about 6 times bigger. Unfortunately for those looking for answers, the true origins of this sphere shall forever remain a mystery, as Japanese officials have since scrapped it for parts. But hey, at least it wasn't a Godzilla egg, right?
Kicking off at number 5, the SS Bay Chimo. Now, although many tales of ghost ships and their legend are mired in murky mystery and spotty historical records, this one is perhaps one of the most well-documented cases of a ghost ship in nautical history. Built in Sweden in the year 1914, the SS Bay Chimo was used as a trading vessel for routes between Hamburg and Sweden in and throughout the First World War. After the war though, it was shipped over to Canada, where it was employed by the Hudson's Bay Company, carrying cargo throughout the Arctic region. There, on October 1st, 1931, during a routine voyage, a devastating storm blew in, and the Bay Chimo was trapped in pack ice just off the coast of Alaska. The crew quickly abandoned ship, traveling over the ice to the nearest town of Barrow, Alaska, where they took shelter. Several days later, after the storm had subsided, the crew returned to retrieve their precious cargo, only to find that the SS Bay Chimo had disappeared. Her captain decided that she must have broken up during the storm and sunk, but a few days later, an Inuit seal hunter told the captain that he had spotted the Bay Chimo nearly 50 miles away from their initial position. As the story goes, the Bay Chimo didn't sink at all, and for several decades after her abandonment, she sailed the Arctic coast completely unmanned. In fact, the SS Bay Chimo was seen on numerous occasions throughout the following century, and several crews even managed to board her. In fact, the last recorded sighting was by a group of Inuit in 1969, a staggering 38 years after she was abandoned. Her ultimate fate? No one knows, but it's safe to say that somewhere out there in the frozen north, the SS Bay Chimo is still sailing. Next up at number 4, the Jenny. Now, this one is a little bit murkier, to say the least, and historical accounts have varied from person to person. One thing always remains the same though: if the accounts are true, then this nautical tale is perhaps one of the most bleakest and most despairing cases of a crew being lost at sea. As the story goes, the Jenny, an English schooner that set sail from its home port of the Isle of Wight in 1822, became frozen in an ice barrier just off the Drake Passage sometime in its voyage in 1823. Nearly a decade later, in 1840, the stark remains of the ship had been dislodged by the ice, only to be discovered by a nearby whaling ship. As some accounts tell, when the crew first saw the ship, they saw 7 figures standing to attention on the main deck, and so thought that the vessel was manned. As they got closer though, they discovered the grim truth. The 7 figures standing to attention were in fact frozen in place, turned to ice by the Arctic cold. Things only got worse from there though, and as the crew of the whaling ship explored the vessel, they found more and more bodies frozen in time deeper below the deck. As some reports go, as the crew came to the captain's cabin, they found him frozen in place with a pen in his hand. The final note written in his log read May 4th, 1823. No food for 71 days. I am the only one left alive. Yeah, spooky stuff.
At number 3 Baltic Sea Anomaly. This was first discovered as recent as 2011 by a group of divers. They were pretty confused when they came across this 60-meter thick circular object that was in the sea at the depth of 90 meters. There's a 300-meter track that actually leads to this unidentified object. Both explorers and scientists are unable to figure out what it is or where it came from. Some speculate that this is a UFO ship that sunk in the water a long time ago. Then there's the theory that this was a German ballistic object that landed in the ocean during World War II. And at number 2, Japanese mermaids. Now, I don't know about you guys, but personally, I believe in mermaids. They could be out there, we don't know.
Wish I could be part of that world.
But the mermaids I'm going to talk to you guys about were nothing like Ariel. Due to its geography, Japan has always had a close relationship with the waters that surrounded the islands. And centuries ago, the story of the human fish came to light. These stories of horror and fear were told by fishermen. The Japanese mermaids are described as grotesque beasts that look like a cross between a fish and a monkey rather than a fish and a beautiful woman. Some would even be said to possess horns and fangs. So basically, these mermaids would be able to shapeshift so they could appear as beautiful women and lure fishermen into the water. Then they would turn themselves into giant jellyfish and kill the man and drag him to the depths of the sea. So it is a long shot, but I don't know, there's a lot of mysterious creatures in the ocean. And 95% of the ocean is still unexplored, so who knows what's happening down there.
Just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, swimming, swimming.
Which brings us to our number 1 spot, the scariest deep sea mystery, the unexplored sections of the sea itself. It's so scary to think that only about 5% of the world's seafloor has been explored. That leaves an insane 95% that's a mystery. The ocean covers more than 70% of the planet's surface. There's still so much to learn and explore. It's expected that there are millions of species that are still down there, aka mermaids, that are waiting to be discovered, and it's speculated that these creatures living in the deepest part of the sea will never be known. One of the scariest things in the world is the unknown.
Kicking off at number 5, the KAZ-2, which perhaps is one of the most terrifying modern instances of the term ghost ship and one of the most profoundly tragic unsolved mysteries of the deep blue sea. The KAZ-2, which was publicly dubbed the Ghost Yacht, was a 9.8 meter catamaran which was found drifting listlessly 88 nautical miles off the northeastern coast of Australia on the 20th of April 2007. The 3 men aboard, who were all residents of Perth in Western Australia, were all incredibly experienced sailors. They were 56-year-old Derek Batten and brothers Peter Tunstall and James Tunstall, who were 69 and 63 respectively. Their whereabouts still remains a mystery to this day, and the fate of these 3 men perhaps may never be known. What made it even stranger is that when the KAZ-2 was eventually found by the Coast Guard, there were no signs of distress, no signs of boat damage, or even a struggle between the 3 men. It was as if they just vanished out of thin air. Coffee cups were left out and all the life jackets on board remained stowed away, indicating that the trio never felt at risk. In an even more curious turn of events, rescue teams discovered video footage of the 3 men on a handheld camera, seemingly hours before they disappeared. It showed them fishing, relaxing in the sun with the motor off, and offered no clues as to how these 3 experienced sailors disappeared at sea. Although an inquiry was later drawn, no definitive conclusions were ever reached, and only theories remain about the ultimate fate of the KAZ-2. Coming in at number 4, the Lady Loverbond. Of course, no list would be complete without a good old sea shanty of jilted lovers and ghostly revenge. As the legend goes, the Lady Loverbond was a schooner that is alleged to have been wrecked on the Goodwin Sands just off the southern coast of Kent on the 13th of February 1749. But if you ask any old sailor worth their salt, they'll tell you that it just so happens to have a habit of reappearing every 50 or so years as a ghost ship. As the story goes, the captain of the ship, a man named Simon Reed, had just been married to his bride Annetta and was celebrating the joyous occasion with a cruise bound for Oporto in Portugal. Now, it is high time to mention that a long-standing sailor's superstition was that back in the day, it was grave bad luck to bring a woman on board, and in many ways, the legend of the Lady Loverbond is a cautionary tale that exemplifies that fact. According to the tale, the ship's first mate, a man named John Rivers, was a rival for the hand of the captain's young wife, and in a jealous fit of rage, he killed the crewman manning the ship's wheel and steered the vessel into the treacherous Goodwin Sands, killing absolutely everyone on board. And if you're asking me, that is a stark overreaction. But nevertheless, since that fateful day in 1749, the Lady Loverbond has been sighted on numerous occasions with an ethereal, ghostly glow, eternally bound to wander the ocean. Next up at number 3, the Fireship of Bay de Chaleur. Which, I mean, come on guys, that's probably the most awesome sounding title to anything on this historical list, right? The Fireship of Bay de Chaleur sounds like something that Geralt of Rivia himself would sail down to Skellig after a summer in Toussaint, but whatever, that's by the by, because this vessel in question actually takes us over to the eternally autumnal eastern tones of New Brunswick, Canada. Now, the Fireship of Bay de Chaleur is also more commonly referred to as the Chaleur Phantom or the Phantom Ship, and it often takes the form of a series of ghost lights just before a storm, appearing as a large three-mast galley. Now, the actual mechanics of this phenomenon are dubiously debated, and many believe it's caused to be down to either the weather phenomenon of St. Elmo's fire or an undersea release of natural gas after a patch of rotting vegetation just off the New Brunswick coast. I mean, that's a completely different story entirely, but what we're concerned with is the actual origin of the Fireship, the history of which is equal parts tragic and gruesome. As the legend goes, back in 1501, a Portuguese captain had spent a year pillaging the coast of Bay de Chaleur, capturing Mi'kmaq natives for the slave trade. However, his cutthroat agenda was miscalculated, as a year later, when he returned to the region on his second voyage, he was captured, tortured and killed by the Mi'kmaq people in revenge for their kidnapped tribesmen. The legend didn't end there though, because a year later, the brother of the Portuguese captain sailed to the bay in search of his missing sibling, and upon seeing the same flags, the Mi'kmaq people attacked the ship, setting it ablaze whilst it was moored in the bay. Cut off, burning, and with certain death facing them, the sailors swore to haunt the bay for 1,000 years as their blazing fireship sank into the Bay of Chaleur. Now, whilst later both Mi'kmaq and Portuguese casualties washed up on the shores of the island, the bay itself is said to be haunted by those that perished, often appearing as distraught sailors and warriors, their flesh burned by the fireship. Swinging in at number 2, the Princess Augusta. And on the topic of ghostly phenomenon, this particular apparition is perhaps one of the most well documented ghost ships of the 18th century, although the actual history behind it is shrouded in intrigue. Although the folklore account of this particular vessel is based upon the historical wreck of the Princess Augusta, a ship that sailed out of Rotterdam in August 1738 under the command of Captain George Long, in more modern records it is commonly referred to as the Palatine, where the Palatine Light, the apparition in question, famously gets its name. And the reason for that is down to the nature of the ship. Alongside 14 of his crew, Captain Long's directive was to transport 240 German immigrants from the Palatinate region of the Rhineland to build a new life for themselves in Philadelphia. However, we know that this is the tale of a ghost ship, and from the offset, their vessel was afflicted with some terribly tragic luck. Not long after passing through the Atlantic, the Princess Augusta's water supply was contaminated, causing a fever and flux to spread through the ship, killing 200 of its passengers, half the crew, and the captain himself. The ship's first mate, Andrew Brooke, quickly took command as the survivors leapt out of the frying pan and into the fire, getting hit by severe storms that pushed the ship far off course to the north. They then endured 3 months of extreme weather and dwindling supplies, when eventually they emerged shipwrecked in Block Island, not far from Rhode Island. Here the tale splits, but one thing is certain: Andrew Brooke, the first mate and commanding captain, took what remained of his crew and rowed ashore without once looking back at the cursed ship. It is said that some of the passengers survived, aided by the Block Islanders, but little to nothing is known about those that survived the entire voyage. As the legend goes, the Princess Augusta was set alight from the coast in the dead of night, pushed out to sea to burn and then disappear. At night, they say that if you listen closely, you can hear the screams of those that didn't make it back to shore. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, the Duke of Danzig. And for our most terrifying ghost ship on this list, of course it has to be a brutal and bloodthirsty pirate ship, a privateer that plundered her way across the Caribbean, notoriously in the name of her royal namesake, the Duke of Danzig. This ship's seafaring career was relatively quiet for the first few years of service, mainly acting as more of a letter of marque, a deterrent more so than a private man of war. However, her fate quickly changed after changing command and sailing under the French captain Francois Aregnadoux. Now, his intentions were to sail and plunder his way across the 7 seas, and plunder he did from Liverpool to Barbados, capturing and scuttling more ships than he could count on his way. However, despite being a vessel of the French Empire, strangely enough, sometime after late June 1812, the Duke of Danzig just disappeared, although there are several records catching a glimpse of her around Canada, but she was never seen again. After the last mention of her, it was thought that she'd been destroyed by a tropical cyclone or sunk in the night after an encounter with a British frigate. However, As the legend goes, that was not the last of the Duke of Danzig. After the golden age of piracy had been sated, a captain by the name of Napoleon Gallois relayed his records of a French frigate encountering the wreck of the Duke of Danzig drifting listlessly at sea. As his crew witnessed, the ship itself was covered from helm to hull in dried blood, and in staggered rows were the putrefying corpses of her crew, many of which were brutally crucified to the masts or the deck. Strangely enough, there were no signs that she had been in recent battle. In fact, despite the blood, she was pristine, no shot holes, and her sails and rigging intact. After searching the ship, Gallois' crew found a stack of blood-stained papers identifying the captain as the same Francois Aregnadour. And then, as they left, the crew of the frigate set the brig ablaze, forever to be buried at sea, along with her mistress.
At number 5, Submarine Disappearance. Back in 1968, submarines from 4 different countries just all of a sudden disappeared. The 4 submarines were the SS Scorpion from the US, the INS Derrick from Israel, the Miner from France, and the K-129 from the Soviet Union. There are many theories out there about what happened to these vessels, from self-firing torpedo accidents to government conspiracy theories. But nonetheless, all these submarines remain missing to this day with no explanation. And knowing how deep the potential remains could have sunk, it's unlikely we will ever know what happened to them. In our number 4 spot, mysterious creatures. Last year a video circulated online. In it we can see a giant blob-like creature floating around near a deep drilling oil rig. This creature fascinated everyone as no one could tell what it was. It seemed to almost be glowing like it was lit from within. It was extremely large and managed to continuously change its shape. Some people figured it was an undiscovered creature, and that it just decided to crawl up from the depths of the ocean, while others took a bit of a stretch and they said it could have been some proof of some type of alien presence. Researchers soon found out that this was actually an insanely gigantic jellyfish, but many people were confused of why it came so close to the surface. It was possible that the drilling disturbed it from the deeper parts of the ocean, but nonetheless it was the first time anyone had ever seen a jellyfish this size, and it's pretty creepy knowing that it's just been lurking down there and it's brave enough to come to the surface.
Coming in at number 3, Hales Bar Dam, Tennessee. Hales Bar was America's first hydroelectric dam, constructed in the early 20th century. However, little did folks know that they were building it on cursed land. Now, some history for you. The Treaty of Sycamore Shoals was agreed upon between Daniel Boone and a handful of Cherokee leaders, which was signed back in 1775. One of the leaders was Dragging Canoe, who was apparently outraged and vowed the land would forever remain dark and bloody for those who lived upon it. The waters in the area were also deemed sacred by the local natives, who believed they could see the souls of their ancestors being sucked into the water's whirlpools. Now, as you have probably already expected, the construction of the dam itself was faced with horrific problems. There were numerous accidents as well as conflict amongst the workers with regards to race. During this time, several hundred workers died while working on Hales Bar, not to mention the dam also leaked not long after completion. Due to this incident, the decision was made to flood the area below the dam, which ended up washing out an old cemetery. In the 60s, the dam was ultimately closed, with a new dam being built in its stead named Nickajack, named for an old Cherokee village. Now, of course, things didn't go so well, and the dam ended up flooding the old village for which it was named after. Those who have visited the old dam are said to have encountered many Cherokee spirits, the ghost of a murdered woman, workers who have perished, as well as demons lurking in the tunnels below. Coming in at number 2, Braley Pond, Virginia. Braley Pond is located in the George Washington National Forest in Virginia and is known for its tranquility, trout fishing, as well as hiking and biking. However, in May of 2003, the Braley Pond area was the site of a brutal gang murder, with suicides in the forest nearby also being reported. Visitors to the nearby campgrounds have often reported the feeling of nausea, disorientation, and dread that suddenly overcomes them. Not to mention, some folks have reported shadowy figures and the sounds of children's laughter. Now, in 2006, members of the Shenandoah Valley Paranormal Society investigated the Braley Pond, stating, I quote, "Something came home with me that night. It felt like slime and I could feel it moving around on my skin." Following the investigation of the pond, it was reported that one of the researchers committed suicide after their visit. However, the most terrifying tale about the pond comes from paranormal researcher Shea Willis. Willis and a friend investigated the pond with a dozen teenagers who were interested in parapsychology. Upon their arrival, Willis instantly sensed anxiety, and not long after, 2 of the teens got physically ill. Following this, Willis decided to end the trip. However, later that night, Willis and her friend decided to return to the site. As soon as they arrived, the sense of dread once again returned, with Willis recalling, I quote, "This presence didn't feel like the others, it didn't even feel human." They then heard something in the pond, and as they turned, a green orb was hovering above the water. Willis fumbled with her camera, during which time the noises became louder and louder. Scared, the pair ran away. However, Willis's friend was flung into the air and into the water by an unknown force. Willis called to him, but as she did, she felt something large crawling on her back. They both managed to make it back to the car. They checked their bodies, but they found nothing on them. Over the next few months, Willis returned to the site, continuing to encounter several strange occurrences. And finally, coming in at number 1, Lake Superior, Canada. In late 1927, the SS Kamloops was experiencing trouble during a storm on Lake Superior. The captain of its accompanying ship, the Quebec, spotted a huge wave brewing and in turn changed course, heading to Fort William instead. He warned the SS Kamloops, however it must have come too late as the message never arrived. After 3 weeks of searching the waters, the hunt for the ship was called off. That following spring, the remains of 9 crew members as well as a lifeboat were found on a small island near a fire pit. The boat would also go down as one of the ghost ships of the Great Lakes, with dozens of ships vanishing without a trace under similar circumstances. The SS Kamloops was eventually found at the bottom of Lake Superior and surprisingly well preserved. The food was in extraordinarily good condition and crew cabins still looked lived in. Now it may be surprising to hear that some incredibly experienced divers braved the waters of Lake Superior and dived to its depths to examine the ship. However, those who have done this have reported seeing one specific Kamloops crew member who apparently appeared to them below the surface. They nicknamed him Grandpa. Now some have reported seeing him lounging in a crew bunk, while others claim to have seen him going about his regular crew routines. However, the most frightening of them all was the report that Grandpa would follow divers as they swam, with the ghost even reaching out to touch them on some occasions. Now the ship was of course investigated, during which time the remains of a preserved crew member was found in the engine room. The body still had its flesh and maintained an icy mummification. This was of course Grandpa's body. Sucks to be him. Ultimately, the cause of the sinking of SS Kamloops was never discovered, and likely never will be.
Starting off strong at number 5, the hulking monolith at the Isle of Wight. Back in December 2020, a strange structure would appear on Compton Beach on the Isle of Wight, an island off the south coast of England which is known as a popular holiday destination lush with resorts and coastal scenery. Discovered by a resident of the island while walking on the beach, the column-like object stood at about 11 feet tall and was made of some sort of metallic material. The lustrous structure would be described as quite magical and very eye-catching. Almost immediately after its appearance, people would question its origins and the meaning behind it. Early on, people would doubt the monolith's very existence, claiming images posted online were photoshopped, but those rumors were quickly put to rest. Once people believed in the object's existence, the real theories started coming through. There are a few camps of thought, one of the most popular being the theory that the monolith was an art piece or a PR stunt. A local DJ even mused that it could be a promotion from a local mirror seller. On the other side were the darker theories. Some people would believe that the object was of alien origin, or perhaps it was some sort of new government spying tool. All theories that sound highly outlandish, crazy, and perhaps unrealistic. But the mystery doesn't end there, because this monolith was in fact one of many found across the globe. The first monolith was found in Utah and went viral shortly after its discovery. After the fact, many monoliths appeared worldwide. They appeared in countries such as Romania, Germany, Canada, the Middle East, you name it. This collection of strange appearances could allude to contact with aliens, demons, or other entities unseen by the public eye and unexplainable by scientific means. The monoliths have since been taken down, with their true origins still up for debate to this very day. Personally, these things remind me of the monolith seen in 2001: A Space Odyssey, but considering they're already gone, I seriously doubt they're like the ones in the movie. Moving on, we got number 4, the mysterious creature from the Red Sea. Camping with her friends along the coast of Dahab, Egypt, Andrea Judd stumbled upon a washed-up sea creature, a whopping 40 feet from the water in June of 2022. The unidentified creature appeared dried up and emaciated, with a yellowy-orange inside which was exposed from its back, revealing a spine-like bone as well. What's strange about this creature is its human-like head, having protrusions on its head that resemble ears, its whole body looking like a long neck of some sort. Although whatever this thing is, it's definitely not human. It's got 2 jaws, no eyes, and its full body looks almost like a giant worm or snake. The woman who first found the carcass would go on to say that just looking at it would make her feel uneasy, and she refused to touch it out of sheer terror of this strange being that she found washed up on this beach. She would later post photos of the creature to a marine life Facebook group, where it would be compared to the Loch Ness Monster, Voldemort, and even orcs from the Lord of the Rings. To me, it looks like those creepy chest bursters from Alien. But actually, this thing is far from fantasy. The closest answer to this mystery was that this creature could be a moray eel, as they were known for also having 2 jaws. While very possible, this still raises many questions like, why was the creature found so far from the water? How did it die? And if it was really an eel, what terrifying monster did this to it? Suffice to say, I'm not visiting that beach anytime soon. To this day, scientists remain uncertain of the creature's origins or species, leaving us only able to speculate on where this thing could have possibly come from. Anyway, coming up next...
Coming in at number 3 we have the Bermuda Triangle. Named for the triangular shape of around 500,000 square miles of ocean between Miami, Bermuda and Puerto Rico, for centuries the Bermuda Triangle has been mystified as a harrowing patch of ocean where sailors and pilots are prone to lose contact with the natural world and disappear forever. Back when Christopher Columbus first sailed the area, he claimed to see a giant ball of light in the sky that crashed into the horizon and made it glow. Soon after, all sorts of strange events happened in the area, including several boats mysteriously disappearing, and in one incident in 1945, an entire squadron of US torpedo bombers vanished into thin air due to all these weird instances, giving this place the name the Devil's Triangle. The exact number of ships and airplanes that have disappeared is not known, but it's estimated that around 50 ships and 20 planes have been victim to the Bermuda Triangle, and many of these mysterious disappearances of these ships and planes have never been recovered. Many see the Bermuda Triangle as a real phenomenon and have multiple theories to try and explain this mysterious place, and some of these theories are human error, paranormal explanations, violent weather like hurricanes, the Gulf Stream, which is a major surface current within the ocean, methane hydrates, which is a form of natural gas that causes bubbles to form around the ship and ultimately sink it without warning. All of these are only theories, and the Bermuda Triangle to this day is the most notorious sea legend of all time. In at number 2 we have the Gulf of Mexico's cursed shipwreck. An estimated 4,000 shipwrecks litter the seabed across the stretch of water, and the Gulf of Mexico is one of the wealthiest locations for maritime archaeology in the world. In February 2001, oil workers for ExxonMobil were laying some pipeline when they happened to stumble upon a shipwreck about 2,600 feet deep. After discovering the wreckage, a team was assembled to explore this mysterious ship, but nothing seemed to go right. The exploration submarine malfunctioned right as it was getting ready to go down to check out the wreck, and that was only the beginning of these mysterious malfunctions. Others include video monitors going out whenever they fired their thrusters, sonars breaking, and hydraulics going haywire with no explanation for any of these problems. After nothing working and things continuing to break, the Navy sent a researcher submarine down to investigate the wreckage, and on the way down it suddenly self-destructed, and somehow when it finally did get to the wreck, its arms were too short to reach anything. 6 months later, in July in 2002, a team working aboard the NR-1 decided to launch a robotic sub down to the wreck site, but the malfunctions continued. The second the rover entered the water, it veered to the right and went out of control. The tether had caught in the propellers, which caused the vessel to smash into the underside of the ship, and the rover was never recovered. Later in the summer of 2002, the curse would continue as a ship from Sustainable Sea Program of the NOAA offered to pick up artifacts from the site. The first time the vessel attempted to leave the dock, debris was lodged in the propeller. The second time, the propeller locked and the ship ended up in dry lock, needing repairs. Over the years, many others have tried to learn more about this wreck, but little was found, and what was found wasn't at all helpful. To this day, nothing has been able to get too close to the shipwreck to investigate and explore the phenomenon, and very little is known about this mysterious ship. Many believe the lives lost in the wreck continue to haunt the ship and will keep anyone and everything out of it at all costs. And finally, in at number 1 we have the unmapped ocean floor. This is truly one of the biggest mysteries, and humans' curiosity about the Earth's floor is centuries old. Much remains to be learned about the ocean, especially exploring the mystery of the deep sea. From mapping and describing the physical, biological, geological, chemical and archaeological aspects of the ocean and understanding their dynamics. For centuries, scholars believed the deep sea to be a lifeless place. Until the late 19th century, we've discovered there is a diversity of life and creatures living down there. Many researchers and divers had tried to dive and take submarines down to explore more of this unknown place, but it's very hard due to the extremely cold temperatures, the darkness, and the literally bone-shattering pressure that's more than 1,000 times that at sea level. In 2019, a retired naval officer, Victor Vescovo, set a new record as one of the deepest dives to date, reaching almost 36,000 feet down in a submarine into the deepest place on Earth, the Marianas Trench. The ocean covers more than 70% of the planet's surface, driving weather, regulating temperature, and ultimately supporting all life's organisms. Throughout history, the ocean has been a vital source of sustenance, transport, commerce, growth, and inspiration. But to this day, more than 80% of the ocean remains unmapped, unobserved, and unexplored, and it's still unknown how deep the ocean really is. Given the high degree of difficulty and cost in exploring our ocean using underwater vehicles, researchers have relied heavily on technologies such as sonar to generate maps of the seafloor, but currently less than 10% of the global ocean is mapped using modern sonar technology, and only about 35% of the United States have been mapped using modern methods. As we go deeper into the ocean floor, it's too deep for this modern technology because it's too remote and dark for this type of visual mapping. So if you go swimming in the ocean, it's very unknown of what is swimming and living below you. But scientists and researchers continue to develop technologies to unlock the many secrets of the ocean. The NOAA is working to increase our understanding of the ocean realm. Coming in at number 5, Lower Yellowstone Falls, Wyoming. All the way back in 1870, a group of 5 American militiamen and their crow guide went exploring in the canyons of Yellowstone. Native American tribesmen stole their horses overnight, so the militiamen began pursuit and caught up with the tribe who were crossing the river near the lower falls. Now, the tribe had constructed a raft, however, it was not strong enough to traverse the currents of the falls, but most of the horses had already been able to swim across. The men and women paddled while the raft slowly began sinking below the waters as it headed towards the falls. As it did, the group began to chant a death song as they approached the falls, and allegedly, the explorers raised their hats in salute as the raft went over. Legend says that 2 screaming eagles flew by at the same moment, and today, people say that while standing near the falls, you can hear the tribe still chanting their death song. Coming in at number 4, White Rock Lake, Dallas, Texas. White Rock Lake began operation all the way back in 1911, in turn providing space for folks to hike and bike and picnic and whatever you want to do, as well as host events. In 1929, the location became a Dallas City park. However, many people are very wary of visiting and fear that they will encounter the Lady of the Lake. Now, stories about the Lady of the Lake go back as far as the 1930s. The first account was made in 1953 by a man named Guy Malloy, a former director of displays for Neiman Marcus. Reportedly, he gave a ride to a young girl close by to the lake. Dressed in one of his wares, the girl claimed to have been in a car accident with her boyfriend nearby. Malloy gave her a raincoat, however, once they went to the address that she provided, she was gone, vanished into thin air. Since his claim came to light, many others have come forward stating that they also picked up the lady in white. Stories differ slightly, with the girl sometimes wearing a nightgown and other times wearing a wedding dress. They also give differing accounts of her death, such as a boating accident, suicide, or even a murder-suicide. However, the one thing that stays the same is the ride itself. She will stand on the road near White Rock Lake and call out to passers-by. She will then sit in the backseat in her dress, soaking wet. She will never speak and will often cry for the duration of the ride before disappearing completely. Those who arrive at the address and speak to the owners of the house will often find out that the lady was a previous owner who drowned years earlier.
Coming in at number 3, we've got the ghost ship of the Northumberland Strait. Yes, Canadian ghost pirates. That pretty much sums up my career aspirations right there. I don't know if that means I would be pirating software related to ghosts or actually becoming a phantom upon the Northumberland Strait, but I don't really care as long as my title involves the words Canadian, ghost, and pirate. But back to the actual tale at hand. This ghost ship is said to sail when it's on fire within the Northumberland Strait. What is the Northumberland Strait? It is a body of water that separates Prince Edward Island from Nova Scotia and New Brunswick in eastern Canada. Now you all know some Canadian geography. I'm so proud of you. The story dates back over 200 years when people started reporting a beautiful schooner catching fire and being engulfed in flames as people watched from shore. Anyone who has ever attempted a rescue mission finds that the ship completely disappears before they can reach it. Apparently the ship shows up before a northeast wind, forewarning terrible storms. Some say it's just an example of St. Elmo's fire, a rare weather condition involving the ionization of air molecules in order to produce a faint glow, but those who have seen the ship ablaze say that it was much too bright to be explained away like that. The prevailing story is that a pirate made a pact with the devil to protect and hide his treasure, and in return he and his crew would sail forever on the burning ship. A pact was made as the ship was burning down and would soon sink along with the treasure. In the end, folks claim that their fate was revenge for the terrible deeds they had done in their days of piracy, like their own personal floating hell. Coming in at number 2, we have Baron Falkenberg, a tale of lovers scorned, brothers bashed, and dice rolled. This pirate haunts Germany's North Sea and has been for over 600 years. Baron Falkenberg was a relatively wealthy member of high society, planning to propose to the village's most beautiful maiden. Then his long-lost brother returned with newly found riches and proposed to her first. At the wedding, the Baron became so upset with his brother that he clubbed him over the head with a bottle of champagne. Classy. Naturally, the brother dropped dead. Seeing this, his bride ran away, claiming that she'd rather die than be with the Baron. Ouch. So the Baron did what any rational fratricidal maniac would do, and stabbed her in the heart. How romantic. Then he ran away to the beach, where he was accosted by a shady man on a boat. This mysterious figure invited him to the ship where he came from, which was anchored offshore a little ways out. The Baron accepted and rowed his way to the Great Grey Behemoth. Since entering, nobody has seen him disembark, and he's been at sea for centuries. The ship he boarded always seems to be heading due north, and flickers of blue flame. Some passers-by claim to have seen the Baron himself playing dice with the devil in order to take back control of his soul. Unfortunately, it appears to be very difficult to win a game of chance against the devil. An additional caveat that can be added is that there are those who will claim that the story of the Baron is also connected to a Norse ghost story. The story tells the tale of a Viking sea captain who stole a magic ring from the gods. As punishment for his crimes, he was turned into a living skeleton covered in fire, condemned to spend the rest of eternity affixed to the mast of a ghostly longship. Whether the two stories are about the same ship, it's hard to say. However, I think we can all agree that a flaming skeleton pirate is pretty badass. And finally at number 1, we have the Flying Dutchman. We saved the most well-known for last. The legendary ghost ship is said to glow with ghostly light as it sails the 7 seas. It will attempt to send messages to land or to people long dead if hailed. Unfortunately, nobody really wants to hail this ship, as the sight of it is seen to be a portent of doom. Like most ghostly ships, the Dutchman can never make port and is doomed to sail the oceans forever. It's theorized that the spectral seafarer had been rounding the treacherous Cape of Good Hope when it encountered a sudden storm. The hatches were battened down and the captain swore he would push right through come hell or high water, and it turns out a little bit of both were on the menu. For his recklessness with his ship and crew, the captain was divinely punished. He was condemned to sail the seas for eternity, serving as a warning to other mariners of bad weather and the cost of hubris. Sightings of the Dutchman have been reported since the 18th century, with many notable scallywags and scurvy dogs laying eyes on the ghastly vessel. Even Prince George of Wales described seeing a ship glowing with a strange light. If you see a ship with skeletons dancing in the rigging, steer clear. It might look like fun, but the captain will try to lure other vessels onto the rocks to ensure nobody else can pass the cape. Sheesh. Remind me not to take a long sailing trip.